Okay, we're recording, and this is February 25th. This is our last uh, Thursday meeting in February. Uh, so we had gotten down, and as we have found, and I want to say this because there may be other people that are watching the video, we had units. We had Brother Rex Turner, when he taught this in graduate school, he had units, and it was unit 1, 2, and 3. And then we picked up 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And so in our discovery that we have found that in lesson 3 is not only lesson 3, but it's also lesson unit 3. It contains unit uh, 5, 6, and 7. So if anybody uses those, then you'll have to make sure that you understand that. I'm going to change my notes and make them the same way, unit 1 through 10. We got down to unit 8, and I'm always trying to find different things. And if you get the notes, you'll find that I try to guide you in reference to the different units. We're in unit 8, uh, a historical survey of the Hebrew people from the rise of the Maccabean period until the Idumean period became the king of the Jews. And I need to get my Bible over here in case we get to using it. And we'll notice some things. Like in our last class, we have observed that Simon the Jewel marked the life of the Maccabean family. And so Eleazar, the beast sticker, was the first to die, gave his life for his nation around 163 BC. Now, when we look at the Maccabean period, we remember Judas, they called him the Hammer, was the next to die. So he died in battle through circumstance of compromise on the part of the Hasidim party, 161 BC. And so John the Holy was the next to die in a surprise attack from the Arabs while he guarded and protected the women and the children, 161 BC. Now, we have seen that they would always try to protect, and we noticed that also if we were to go back to read the Old Testament, Samuel, even the Kings and the Chronicles, most likely, if you go back and read those, that find that that's what they did. The Jewish people did the very same thing. They'd go off to war, but they left people back to protect the women and the children. So that's what he did, and he was killed with a surprise attack. There was Jonathan the Cunning. He was the next to die, so he fell a victim of the treachery by Tryphon, 143 BC. And the last to die was Simon the Jewel, who was murdered by his son-in-law Ptolemy, who was a Hellenist heathen at heart, 135 BC. We're going to talk later more about the Hellenists. Not a single one of Mattathias' sons died in bed surrounded by friends. Usually that's where a person will die, but that is not the case with any of his children. They were, without doubt, courageous men, and therefore they were attacked and they were killed, just like in some ways. And then the others had, died in battle and so forth. Surprise attack and was murdered, and so many things took place. Simon, now the Jewel, had 3 sons. He had Judas and Mattathias and John Hyrcanus. And so the older sons, Judas and Mattathias, were slain with their father. And so that left Judas Hyrcanus, and he had a sufficient warning and eluded it. And so he immediately appeared in Jerusalem and was unanimously proclaimed the high priest, and the ruler of the country claimed the high priest and the ruler of the country. Later on, when we get through, I think it's if we cover everything that we get down to unit number 10, and we'll start another study looking at the history, not the history, this is the history. We're going to look at the culture and politics and things of that sort during this time also. But we will also show all different high priests. I found a list of all the high priests, and I have listed them in the notes. So we'll look at those all the way down through the time of the destruction of Jerusalem. But some of the highlights in the life and reign of John Hyrcanus include the following. Number one, John first measured was to march against Jericho to avenge the base murder of his father and his brothers. And so his brother-in-law, Ptolemy, had Ptolemy, he had hidden his power, however, and Hyrcanus, his mother, and other brethren. And so Ptolemy shut himself up in a fortress and exposed his captives on the wall. Up on the wall. And so he scourged them and threatened them with death. So here came Hyrcanus, his mother's exhorted him, notwithstanding her own danger, to avenge his father's murder. Hyrcanus hesitated, and in a time of early raised the siege, Ptolemy then fled to Philadelphia, and of his subsequent fate we know nothing. We don't know what happened. We'll see there are different Ptolemies, and we will look at a number of those reference to the culture. But the rapid movement so that Hyrcanus disconcerted the Confederates before Ptolemy and Antiochus. Still, the Syrian army overran the whole country. And so Hyrcanus was besieged in Jerusalem, where he was reduced to the last extremity by famine. And he was compelled to expel from the city all those, the young and the old of both sexes, who were contributing to that of the defense. Now, the besiegers refused to let them pass. And so many perished miserably in the ditches and on the outworks. That means the outwards of that of the city and so on. Antiochus, however, proved to be a moderate and generous enemy. On the first of Tabernacles, he conceded a week's truce. And further, he furnished the besieged with victims for sacrifice, bulls with golden horns, and gold and silver, and vessels for the temple service. Did. And so he was gratefully compared with his impious ancestors, Antiochus Epiphanes. So the Jews called him Antiochus the Pious. I guess since all the others got a capital by what they call him, I give Mr. Antiochus the Pious a capital. But Antiochus finally concluded a piece of hard terms, but better than Hyrcanus, considering his low position, could fairly expect. And the terms of this was, number one, the country was to submit to the vassalage under the kings of Syria, number one. Number two, tribute was to be paid for Joppa and other towns held by grants from the predecessors of Antiochus. And so Jerusalem, number three, was to be dismantled. And so when we read, I mean, we know the Assyrian captivity in 722 BC and the Babylonian captivity in 586 BC. And there are numerous of others times when Jerusalem is always, being attacked and destroyed. And even today, we see some of the very same things that take place, and that basically everybody tries to destroy that of Jerusalem. And it's like it was back then, is that when, like Jerusalem, we'll say Egypt was their helper, and if they were to be attacked, the same is true today in reference to that of the state of Israel, that if anything happens, the United States is going to help them. And so we see that same thing all the way through that of the Old Testament when they were in need of help. And we see also, especially through that of between the Testaments. 4 years later, after Jerusalem was dismantled, John Hyrcanus was summoned by Antiochus the Pious to accompany him on an expedition into Parthia to deliver Demetrius Nicator, brother of the king and formerly possessor of the crown, but long a captive in Parthia. So Hyrcanus returned before the defeat. So this lost Antiochus his throne and lost his life. So in the meantime, though, this Demetrius Nicator escaped and recovered the throne of Antioch. So here's Hyrcanus seized the opportunity of throwing off the yoke of Syria, and the Jewish kingdom resumed its independence. And so the independence has maintained until it was compelled to acknowledge the Roman dominion. And so, because we have seen in our looking at between the Testaments that the Roman people, I mean, the Roman Empire, the Roman country to begin with, but it became an empire, how that it grew little by little. And yet, as we look at it, it seems as if that it lasted longer than any of the others. First under the Ashmonean dynasty, and then under the house of Herod. And Herod is a character, or the Herods are a character in the New Testament. You hear a lot about the Herodians. John Hyrcanus destroyed the rival of the Samaritan temple on Mount Gerizim in 129 BC. Now, on that, it was the Samaritan temple, and there they worshiped their gods. The Samaritan people were Jewish, Gentile mixed marriages, and so they had their Mount Gerizim a place so that they could worship their idols. Syrian monarch was much distracted by rival competitors for the throne, and so the enterprising Hyrcanus lost no opportunity of extending his territory and also increasing his power. We moved to the level to the ground, the old rival temple, not a vestige remained. So 200 years, this hated Ephesus had stood to controvert the concept that the sanctuary in Jerusalem was the only place to worship. And if you recall, though, if we go all the way back to the time, well, that of Saul, who reigned for 40 years, and David, who reigned for 40 years, and Solomon, who reigned for 40 years. And that's just a rounded off number. But during when Solomon died, Rehoboam and Jeroboam divided the kingdom. And so there was a place they were supposed to be able to worship under Jeroboam in two different places. And Rehoboam kept Jerusalem, but we find that Jeroboam he had a different place, two different places for him to worship. So now, during between the Testaments and near in that of this period of John Hyrcanus, the Temple of Jerusalem resumed its dignity as the only sanctuary where the God, capital G, of the fathers might be worshipped. The fathers being that of Abraham and Isaac and David, Isaac and Jacob. So yet at a more remote distance, another temple had arisen in Egypt. And that's how far these people had gone. Again, now, remember, there has been a dispersion of them during the Babylonian captivity, and we've already noticed others all the way down through all the different empires. But they were scattered, and as they were scattered, they picked up the culture and the parts of what most people did. And so here, this temple, in fact, another nation of Jews had grown up there in Egypt, another nation. On the capture of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, a great number of Jews under Gedaliah had to flee to Egypt. And so Alexander Great and had encouraged large numbers of the Jews to settle in Alexandria, where the big library was, the greatest library. Privileges that put them on par with the Greeks of Macedonia. So, they par in reverence that the laws and so forth that they would be able to do, that whatever the freedoms that the Greeks of Macedonia had, we find that the Jews that were settled in Alexandria had. So Ptolemy, the founder of the Epico-Grecian kingdom, transported from Judea some 30,000 families. And so now you say families, if that's 3 to 4, so you're talking about around 100,000 people, if that would be the case. We're not talking about husband and wife, he says family, so that means they had children. So since he settled in Cyrene, but most in Alexandria, or some did. And so during the oppression of the Syrian kings, many of the Jews envied the peaceful and prosperous state of the brethren. They took refuge under the protection of that of the Ptolemies. So during the reign of Ptolemy Philometor, 181 to 146 BC, Onias, the son of Onias, that was murdered by the Menelaus during the period of Antiochus Epiphanes, and who was a rightful priest, fled into Egypt. So this Onias think I'd been calling him something else, but I was doing it wrong. But Onias rose in high favor with the king Ptolemy by Philometor and his queen was Cleopatra. Already from a historical standpoint, got a look at some things in reference to her. Onias conceived the idea of building a temple for the use of the Jews in Egypt. So the king was actually confronted with the fact that considerable wealth flowed out of his nation to the temple in Jerusalem as offsprings from the Jews. In other words, there was the temple fee that they had to pay, and so they kept sending that up. That money would be taken up, and it would be carried to Jerusalem. So thus, he granted to Onias a ruined temple in Leontopolis, city of ancient Egypt in the Nile Delta, together with a tract of land um, for the maintenance of the worship. So Onias justified his action and reconciled his countrymen to this bold innovation by prediction of Isaiah 18 and verse 19, which reads, and that's another thing that I changed on our notes. I inserted our references. So we don't have to go to other books. But there we find that Isaiah says, in that day shall there be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof of the Lord. So both the temple and the domain in Egypt that had been given remained unviolated until the reign of Vespasian in 69 to 79 AD. Now you'll notice that was during that of the destruction of Jerusalem, that is the great persecution that had been taking place until Nero died. But then you would have that of the destruction of Jerusalem that was coming to place in AD 70. So that's some type of history that would be there. His son was the general in charge of the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. So Alexander being the retreat of the Grecian learning, the Jews turned their attention. We would think that they would turn their attention to that of the literature of the Old Testament and things that have been written during that time, but they did not do that. They turned to that of philosophy. And we've studied about the different philosophers that had come along under the Greeks. And so the Aramean Jews denied their antiquity as a nation and reproached them with the servitude and base conditions of the ancestors and that of Egypt. So the rigid Jews did not forgive the Jews in Egypt for their adoption of the Greek language and the study of the Greek letters. Now, to me, when I think about that, because again, if we were to go over to, and this is not a verse, it's not in our notes, but if we were to go over Acts chapter 2, and I believe it's verse 8, where it begins, and if you'll notice there, now here it says that we're saying that the rigid Jews would not forgive or could not forgive these Jews in Egypt because they had adopted the Greek language and they had studied the Greek letters. And so then we find in AD 30, or some people say 33 AD 30 or 33, we find that Luke writes, he says, and how we hear every man in our own tongue, wherein we were born. Think about that. Because he goes on, he says, Parthians, Medes, the Elamites, and the dwellers in Mesopotamia and in Judea and Cappadocia and Pontus and Asia and Phrygia and Pamphylia and Egypt and the parts of Libya about Cyrene and strangers of Rome. Now, strangers of Rome, we kind of think about them as being proselytes, but then Jews and proselytes, Crete and Arabians, we do hear them speak in our tongues the wonderful works of God. Now, they were speaking different dialects because they had learned the Greek language. And so that's something that, that we learned, again, during this, between the testaments, everything had to get ready for that of the plan that God had for the coming of the Messiah. And also preaching the gospel to the whole world, all nations, according to Matthew 28, Mark 16, Luke 24, that this had to be carried out. But before that could be carried out, yes, Jesus had to come. And all these other plans that God had made, Ephesians 3, verses 9 through 11, all those things had to take place. And so here is the Greek translation of the scriptures had been in existence in Egypt since the time of Ptolemy II, Philadelphia around 285 BC. And so the history of the persecution of the Alexandrian Jews in Third Maccabees. Now, Third Maccabees is not listed; they're in the pseudographic. Um, that might be another thing that we'll look at. Maybe we'll, if we if we have time, we may look at the pseudographical books after we get through with the other things that we're going to do. I may just add that to the end of the notes, and that way, if we don't get to them, then they'll be there. But Third Maccabees, and it was apparently compelled to show that those Jews in Egypt had been exposed on account of their religion to equal persecution with their brethren, that they had endured with equal courage and were delivered in a miraculous manner. Now, Ptolemy Philopater, or he's also called Ptolemy Physcon, had determined on the extermination of the Jews unless they should give up their religion. And if we were to go back and read the book of Esther, we would find, that Esther and then Mordecai, that they basically saved the human race. And so, because of the prophecies that were given in the Old Testament, there would be no way that God was going to allow that. So only 300 of the Jewish people complied with the demand. And so the rest was shut out in the hyperdrome to be destroyed by elephants. And that'd be, they would be trampled to death. And so the king was enraged in a drunken revel, and the Jews remained a whole day expected to be crushed at any moment. And they were, however, determined to endure their miserable fate. Now, to do that, you have to stop and simply say to them that these were faithful Jews. They were going to die for what they believed. And so when the elephants were let loose, they refused to assail the Jews, but turned in all their fury on the spectators on whom they committed frightful ravages. So, you have to stop and think in reference to things like the providence of God. God was not going to allow these Jews who were faithful, they would die for what they believed. And so we see that what takes place is that the elephants turn on the spectators. For the most part, though, the Alexandrian Jew mingled in all the transactions and attained the highest honors of the state. Nice, who built the temple, filled the most eminent offices in the state and in the army. In other words, he chose the best for officers and the best for that to be in the army. And so he can do that. But later, Chelpis, Chelis, and Ananias, two Jews, commanded the armies of Cleopatra. And so John Hyrcanus turned his forces against the Edomites and subjected the country, compelled those ancient rivals to submit to circumcision to adopt the Jewish religion, 109 BC. Now, again, I wonder, and it's just my wondering, that this was the thing that, that had been taught to that of the Jewish people, that if anybody was going to be part of the Jewish religion, they had to be circumcised. Yet if they're circumcised now, that meant also that they could enter in reference to the Jewish, but they had to learn the Ten Commandments and all the other commandments that was given, and they had to obey the offerings and the sacrifices, all the things like the Jew did, but there were limitations that were placed upon them. They could not go into the inner part of the temple. While Egypt and Syria were desolated by the contentions of the successive pretenders, Judah enjoyed peace under the vigorous administration of Hyrcanus. Now, having destroyed the rival temple on Mount Gerizim, Hyrcanus moved with full force upon the Edomites. And we remember the Edomites and how that basically when the Jewish people were traveling through the Canaan land, that they had to go around, and instead of the Edomites did not allow them to perish, and when Israel was attacked, the Edomites did not even help them. Then in the book of Obadiah, we find that they have to pay for that. And so here he was so completely incorporated the two nations that the name of Idumea, Edom, appears no more in history as a separate kingdom. We'll bring it up again, but that's because we're going to go back after 109 BC. But it is ironic in the fault of a grandson of Mattathias forcing religious conformity on people conquered by Jewish arms. It is further ironic, as you think about that, to find at the opening of the New Testament that Herod, an Edomite, was the king of the Jews. And it was he, that is, as we think about Herod, the one that wanted to have the Messiah killed, that is, the babies. Matthew chapter 1 and chapter 2. Jesus was born according to what Matthew writes in reference to what Herod wanted to do in chapter 2 there. But while Hyrcanus had been triumphant abroad, he was troubled at home, especially in the latter part of his reign, by a serious dissension between two great religious political factions that's divided the state, those of the Pharisees and those of the Sadducees. Now, we're going to talk more about them and look at some of the things that the Bible points out to us that the Pharisees, the Sadducees, did not believe in spirits and the resurrection. We find that the Pharisees believed in both of those. And we'll find that as we look between the testaments and these groups are coming up and being established, that there was great hatred between them. So the term Pharisees and Sadducees first appeared in history about 109 BC. So the Maccabees owed their success to the Hasdim party, or the righteous. And so we stop for a moment and think about that. We think about the Pharisees. They were very legalistic. Sadducees were kind of loose with some things. But one voice alone, that of Eleazar, interrupted the general harmony of that of the Jewish people. He announced, "If you are a just man," he said, "abandon the high priesthood, for which you are disqualified by the illegitimacy of your birth." Well, the mother Hyrcanus had formerly, it is said, though falsely according to Josephus, been taken captive and thus exposed to the pollution embraces of that of a heathen master. So the indignant Hyrcanus demanded a trial of Eleazar for defamation. By the influence of the Pharisees, Eleazar was shielded and escaped with scourging and impious, or imprisonment. He escaped both of those, and so Hyrcanus engaged in this unexpected hostility, gave ear to a certain Jonathan, a Sadducee, who accused the rival faction of conspiracy to overthrow the sovereign power. Now, notice we said that was an accusation, not a proven thing. And yet we're going to see later what Hyrcanus does when it comes down to his death. But from that time, Hyrcanus entirely alienated himself from the Pharisaic council. And so we see this breach that has taken place, and favoritism now has been given to that of the Sadducees. And so when we think about that of Hyrcanus, well, a summary of his reign on Hyrcanus should include the following. Number one, though there were differences and rivals of parties among the Jews, the unity of the Hasmonean state stood firmly. And number two, the borders of the state had been extended on all sides of Hyrcanus before Hyrcanus died in 104 BC. So, although devout, number three, Jews frequently differed with Hyrcanus on religion and politics, his personal life was free from suspicion. Hyrcanus' children, however, had grown up in a palace and numbered themselves among the aristocrats. So the training of those children were more Greek than Hebrew. They looked upon the Pharisees with disdain and contempt. So again, there was this, as we would probably look about it, discrimination in reference to that of Hyrcanus, because what was taking place among the Sadducees and the Pharisees. He favored the Sadducees. So that ends Unit 8, but in Unit 9, there is a historical survey of the Hebrew people from the death of Hyrcanus in 105 BC. Now, he died in 104, but it starts in 105, to Pompey at the gate in Jerusalem in 63 BC. And so Pompey now enters into our picture of the historical survey of the Jewish people. Now, we think about, I guess most of us had schooling, and we talked about Julius Caesar and Anthony and Cleopatra and all that. But here, and also Pompeii came up. But we have, it's not a new thing to most people when you go back and study between the Testament that this comes up along with that of the Caesars, the beginning of the Caesars. We observe a lifetime that John Hyrcanus broke with the conservative or the Hasidim party. Now, thus, within 100 years, an alliance was made between the ruling family and the cultural classes, between the royal and the priestly house on the one side, and the representatives of Greek culture and worldly fanaticism on the other side. Uh, and so you see the differences in reference to how these ruling families and the cultural classes had changed, or I mean, had divided themselves. And so the grandsons of Mattathias was in the same camp with the sons of those who, with a full face, had been ready to Zeus. And so that is, they were actually dedicated to that of idolatry. So thus, we read there, then the high priest rose up, and all that were with him, which is the sect of the Sadducees. And again, therefore, showing the favoritism. Now, John Hyrcanus had those three sons, Aristobulus the first, Antigonus, Jonathan, or Janus, better known as Alexandra Janus. And so John Hyrcanus left his sovereignty to his widow, like many people do. They, time if you even don't even have a will, if the wife's name's on the deed of the property in our country or in our state, then they receive 50% of the estate. If there's any heirs, she gets a third of whatever the heirs. And so, but he had a son, Aristobulus, but apparently he had made a true estimate of that son's character. Aristobulus threw his mother in jail and starved her to death. And through insane jealousy, we find that he put his brother to death, and he reigned, though, only 1 year. He crowded crime enough to make himself unique in infamy. He died from a disease and agonies of remorse. And so Jonathan, the brother Aristobulus, succeeded the throne in 105 for BC. And he assumed the Greek name of Alexander. Again, he added to this the abbreviation form of his Jewish name, Jenna. So the names kind of change. And so you have to watch that when you're reading, because all of a sudden you're talking about Jonathan, and then maybe you may be talking about his other name, Jannaeus, and then all of a sudden it's Jenna. So have to watch that and read it. He became known in history as Alexander Janus. He reigned 27 years. And so that gets us down to around 78. Let's see, 8 from 15 is 7, and 2 from 9 is 7. So 77, somewhere along in there. His reign was one long story of border and civil war, of alternate success and defeat, of daring adventure and ruthless slaughter. But that describes not only him, but it describes a lot of others also during his time. He emerged from the hurly-burly of his many wars with an enlarged territory embracing more than the original possessions of the 12 tribes. So to me, that's interesting because of the doctrine of premillennialism. I've never heard them mention that at one time before Christ came, that the land between among the 12 tribes, that the Maccabean period, or between the Testament period, helps us to see that Jonathan, or Alexander Janus, that how that he embraced more of the original possession of the 12 tribes. That's interesting. And so, I mean, when it comes up, it says, well, they gotta have the land. They're gonna possess the land. They never possessed it. Well, Joshua said they did, and other places we could find where they did. And right here we find in reference to history, if we look at the history of the between the Testaments as being true history, then they at one time had more than the 12 tribes. His enemies at home were harder to manage than his enemies abroad. And so we would think because he was in charge and everything that all the people would be following him like a king and everything, but that's not so. He had enemies, but he had enemies abroad, but the enemies in his home was hard to manage. The Pharisaic and the Sadduceic quarrels uh, raged at its worst, and I really think that when you look at that, that it would be helpful for us to think about that when we are studying the New Testament in reference to the Pharisees and the Sadducees, because of the rage at its worst during this time. Now, so this is about, as again, say 105 BC. So we're talking about 105 years before the Christ would come. And so when we begin to read in reference that he's come and everything, we don't read in the first few chapters of Matthew, in the first few chapters of Luke, in reference to a lot of things going on. We have the birth of Christ, and all of a sudden he's 12 years old, Luke chapter 2, verse 62. So then we find there that all of a sudden he's 30 years old, he's baptized in that of John the Baptist, and all of a sudden we start hearing about Sadducees and Pharisees. And so, but they had raged 100 years before at its worst. Now, so Alexandra, Janus threw himself wholly against the Sadducee scale, and I think I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna highlight those, and I'm going to change. Well, I'm not going to change to that yellow because I can't see it. Hit black and change that there, so I can go back and I'm going to change that to the Pharisees and Sadducees quarrel. I think that's it's easier to say. One side was the priestly party backed by the royal power, and on the other side was the Puritan party backed by their popular sympathy. So again, the Sadducees versus the Pharisees for 6 years. Now notice that 6 years there was a chronic civil war that raged among the Pharisees and Sadducees. And Janus revealed in faction ferocity. For the first time in history, we begin to hear of the cross. Religious rancor first raised the cross. At a drunken festival at Jerusalem, Janus caused 800 leading Pharisees to be crucified. Now, we always say, and remember now, there's that influence of Rome already upon them in some ways, but we always say that he died on a Roman cross. So we would ask, what kind of crosses did they use in 105 BC? It is estimated that no less than 50,000 were sacrificed in the societal strife among them. So again, Alexander Janus, on his deathbed, counseled his wife to join with the Pharisees. Now I said he joined with that of the Sadducees, but now he's telling her he's getting ready to die. He's basically said, "You go with the Pharisees." And so, toward the close of his life, he seems to have come to the conclusion that his policies toward the Pharisees had been a mistake. So here he is counseling his widow, to whom he left everything to her, to quit the alliance in whose interest his crimes had been committed and his miseries endured, and to join herself with long oppressed Pharisees. Now you have to remember about their children in reference to who they were. They were a part of the Sadducees. So in other words, to quit the priestly party and to embrace the popular party, or the Puritan party, as we've already called it once before. And so when we think about that, then you can think back in reference to that of Moses. Moses was raised in that of the household of Pharaoh, but his mother's one took care of him, but he never became an Egyptian or embraced the religion of that of the Pharaohs or Egypt. He always remained faithful to what his mother had taught him. So you look upon here in reference to that of Alexander Janus and his wife, how they had taught their children to be Sadducees. So he counseled her, and the counsel, as we look at it, he gave was wise. As we look at history, now she may not have thought it was wise when he was giving it to her, but it was wise according to what history. So here is Salome Alexandria, succeeded to the throne as queen in her own right, and she was the widow of two Hasmonean rulers, Aristobulus, and Alexander Janius, respectively. Uh, Now, I don't know how old she was, but I think she was older than Alexander Janius. She reigned prosperously for 9 years. A woman reigned. We will see who will be the high priest when we look at the priests. But the royal and popular powers were now won, and the Sadducees were pounded between them. Things have changed, in reference to that, because her brother Simeon was one of the leading Pharisees. He now became the foremost man of the realm. Now he also had, their children. That is Queen Alexandra and Alexander Janus. Their children were Sadducees. So you can see, the turmoil in reference to the family itself. He exalted the Pharisaic faction to a supremacy when it never lost which it never lost until the kingdom itself was lost. And so that would be in the Roman Empire. Now, the queen determined for the counselors and the friends of her late husband the measure of fate they had previously dealt out to others. And so until her death in 70 BC, Queen Alexandra held the reins of government wisely and firmly. And so her chief anxiety actually came from her sons. Now, I wonder why. Her eldest son was named Hyrcanus. The priesthood was confirmed upon him, and he was without energy. He was inoffensive, but indolent and incapable. And also, Queen Alexander's second son was named Aristobulus. So he was a counterpart of his father. And so he was bold and enterprise and theoric in manner, and barbaric in nature. And so now we're actually describing the children. He soon set himself in opposition to his mother and his counselors because he saw the Sadducee faction, the elements out of which he might mount to power at the expense of his weakling brother. And so he threw the shield of his rank and over them, and they became his instruments. He hoped to win a crown, and they hoped to win in a revenge. The real results was the overthrow of the national independence and the extinction of the Maccabean dynasty. And so again, we find that now that this war that they have, it goes on and tells us that a civil war broke out between the two sons of Queen Alexander, Hyrcanus versus Aristobulus, on the occasion of her death. So Aristobulus soon proved that his superiority over his brother Hyrcanus, who was the legitimate heir. Again, you go back and you look at that of Hyrcanus, that is the eldest son of Queen Alexander, that, he didn't have the energy, he was indolent, he was incapable. And so when we stop and we look at that here he was, Aristobulus soon proved his superiority over his brother. And so a compromise actually reached. And so Hyrcanus willingly consented to surrender his throne on conditions of being allowed to retain the family wealth and dignified position. I have in the notes for us section 2 of what Josephus is telling us, but I am going to go back and I'm going to read directly from Josephus over here in another place. And he talks about in his book, in the historical book of the antiquities of Josephus, he calls this from the death of Queen Alexandra to the death of Antigonus. And in chapter 1, he talks about how this war between Aristobulus and Hyrcanus about the kingdom, and how they made an agreement that Aristobulus should be king and Hyrcanus live a private life, as also Hyrcanus a little afterwards was persuaded by Antipater to flee or to fly, we would say flee, to Arthas. And so here's what takes place. In section 1, he records, Josephus does, he says, we have related the affairs of Queen Alexandra and her death in the foregoing book, and will not speak of what followed, and was connected with those histories declared before we proceed, that we have nothing so much as at heart as this, that we may omit no facts either through ignorance or laziness. For we are under the history and the explanation of such things as the greatest part and unacquainted with them because of this distance from our times, and we aim to do it with proper beauty of style so far as that it derived from the proper words harmonically disposed, and from such ornaments of speech also as contribute to the pleasure of our readers. He says, goes on, and he says that they may entertain the knowledge of what we write with some agreeable satisfaction and pleasure. But the principal scope that authors ought to aim at above all the rest is to speak accurately and to speak truly for the satisfaction of those that are otherwise unacquainted with such transactions and obliged to believe with what these writers inform thee. You can take that for what it's worth, but all Josephus is saying there is that he's going to record it the way he sees it. But we have to remember when Josephus is writing, because he's writing when the Caesars are on the throne, and so we have to make sure we understand that. And some people say that he wrote slanted to that of the Romans, and some people said it was maybe slanted to the higher group of people at the time, like the Pharisees. So at the time of also the Sadducees, but then it switched with the first Hyrcanus died to that of the Pharisees. But he says there, Hyrcanus then began his high priesthood on the 3rd year of the 177th Oliped, when Quintus Oratiensis and Quintus Metellus, who was called Metellus of Crete, were council at Rome. See the connection? In Josephus is there. He simply tells us that he's at Rome, when presently Aristobulus began to make war against him, and as it came to battle with Hyrcanus at Jericho, many of his soldiers deserted him and went over to his brother, upon which Hyrcanus fled into the Citadel, where Aristobulus' wife and children were imprisoned by his mother, as we have said already, and attacked and overcame those adversaries that had fled thither and laid within the walls of the temple. When he had sent a message to his brother about agreeing the matters between them, he laid aside his enmity to him on these occasions or conditions, that Aristobulus should be king, and that he should live without intermeddling with public affairs and quietly enjoy the estate he had acquired. When they had agreed upon these terms in the temple and had confirmed the agreement with oaths, and had given one another their right hand, and embraced one another in the sight of the whole multitude, they departed. One Aristobulus to the palace, and Hyrcanus as a private man to the former house of Aristobulus. So came there because of what they did, the handshake, the hug, that all things are well. But there was a certain friend of Hyrcanus, and a Dominion called Antipater, who was very rich and in his nature active and a seditious man, who was at enmity with Aristobulus and had differences with him on account of his goodwill. So it is true, he says, Josephus says, that it is true that Nicholas of Damascus says that Antipater was the stock of the principal Jews who came out of Babylon into Judea, but that assertion of his was to gratify Herod, who was his son, and who by certain revolutions of fortune came afterwards to be king of the Jews. So whose history we shall give you in the proper place hereafter, Josephus says. However, this Antipater was at first called Antipas, and that was his father's name also, who, he says to us there, says to us, they relate this. And so he relates this, that King Alexander and his wife made him general of all Idumea, and that he made a league of friendship with those Arabians and Gazites and Ashkelonites that were of his own party, and had by many and large presents made them his fast friends. I don't know about fast friends, but now this younger Antipater was suspicious of the power of Aristobulus and was afraid that some mischief he might do him because of his hatred to him. So we would find, I'm going to sneeze. uh, uh, he was afraid that some mischief he might do to him because of his hatred to him. But now they shook hands and hugged one another. And so he stirred up the most powerful of the Jews and talked against him to them privately, and said that it was unjust to overlook the conduct of Aristobulus, who had gotten the government unrighteously, and ejected his brother out of it, who was the elder and ought to be retained what he belonged to by prerogative of his birth. And the same speeches he perpetually made by Hyrcanus, and told him that his own life would be in danger unless he guarded himself and got quiet of Aristobulus, for he said that the friends of Aristobulus omitted no opportunity to advise him to kill him, as being then and not before sure to retain his principality. So Hyrcanus gave no credit to those words of his, and being a gentle disposition and one that did not easily admit the calamities against other men, this temper of his, not disposing him to meddle with public affairs and want of spirit, occasioned him to appear to be spectators to degenerate and unmanly. So while Aristobulus was of a contrary temper and an active man, and one of great generous soul. So since therefore Antipater saw Cranus did not attend to what he said, he never ceased day by day to charge feigned crimes upon Aristobulus, and to cultivate him before him, and as he had in mind to kill him. And so by urging him perpetually, he advised him and persuaded him to flee to Artaxerxes, king of Arabia, and promised that if he would comply with his advice, he would also assist him and go with him. So when Hyrcanus heard this, he said that it was for his advantage to flee to Artaxerxes. And so now Arabia is a country that borders upon Judea. However, Hyrcanus sent Antipater first to the king of Arabia in order to receive assurance from him that when he should come into the manner of supplicant to him, he would not deliver him up to his enemies. So Antipater, having received such assurance, returned to Hyrcanus and to Jerusalem. While after he took Hyrcanus and stowed out of the city by night, and went a great journey, and came and brought him to the city of Petra, where the palace of Artaxerxes was. And as he was a very familiar friend of that king, he persuaded him to bring back Hyrcanus into Judea. And this persuasion he continued every day without any intermission. He also proposed to make him presents on that account. At length he prevailed with Artaxerxes in his suit. So moreover, Hyrcanus promised him that when he had been brought thither and had received his kingdom, he would restore that country, those 12 cities, which his father Alexander had taken from the Arabians, which were those of Medaba, Nabalo, Labrius, and Tharabasa, Agala, Ethron, Zor, Oron, Marcia, Ruda, Lucis, and Oruba. So they were going to take that. He would give that back to them, and so that also tells us what happens before and during and after of what takes place when that civil war broke out, and Aristobulus proved to be superior over that of Hyrcanus, who was a legitimate heir. So that they reached that compromise, but yet Hyrcanus was encouraged to go to that Arabia. And so on the side of Hyrcanus, though, was that immediate officer we just read about. Now we're going to talk about what make the points that Brother Turner would have made. On the side of Hyrcanus was the immediate officer of wealth and prestige named Antipater and Antipater. And so his hope and ambition rested with the cause of Hyrcanus. And we see that the settlement meant the extension of his hope and ambition. Now this Edomite, that is Antipater, had risen high in the service of Alexander, that's Queen Alexander, and on her death, he had espoused the cause of the elder brother. Policy, not fidelity, had ruled his choice. And so under the energetic Aristobulus, he could never hope for a position to which his ambition soared. And so this is on the other hand, when he would be with the high Hyrcanus, would be king after his own heart, the Jew would reign, but the Idumean would rule, and nothing less that as mayor of the palace, so to speak, as he aspired to be. So he determined, therefore, to prevent a peaceful settlement between Hyrcanus and Aristobulus. I guess we would probably say he shouldn't have stuck his nose in their business, but he did. This Edomite was a very embodiment of that subtle and patient and untired energy. So he was passionless, ceaselessly active. He was outwardly pious, but inwardly ruthless. He was gentle in manner, but inflexible in will. He was a man to be reckoned with in any age. And his first objective was the break of the fraternal truce and the dogs of war. Antipater persuaded the faithful Hyrcanus to flee after him to seek the support of the powerful Artis, the Arabian, and neighboring Arabian. And ready for spoil, an Arab army soon poured upon unhappy Palestine. And so Aristobulus, though defeated in battle, fled to Jerusalem. And so once again, we find that in the city experienced a terrible siege. And during the battle conflict, Onias, who was held in great repute because of his efficacy of his prayer in a time of drought, was brought forth by the besiegers and told to pray against the besieged. His difficulty, the aged man knelt down and prayed, "O God, the King of the universe, since on one side are they people, and on the other side thy priests," he says, "I beseech thee to hear not the prayers of either against the other." That's pretty good. That'd be a good illustration to use sometimes when we talk about how the people pray. Are you being able to hear me? My internet is unstable, it says. Oh, okay, so let's look at point number 6. Both Hyrcanus and Aristobulus appealed to Sacras, the Roman general who had just captured Damascus. Now again, we're seeing a stronger and stronger movement by the Romans. Jerusalem was divided within. An unholy alliance existed without. At this time, a new actor appeared on the scene. Rome, the great republic of the West, had been embracing nation after nation. So Rome was now successfully closing a campaign against Asia Minor. Socrates arrived at Damascus and he captured it. So both brothers, Hyrcanus and Aristobulus, solicited his intervention. Now, it's really something because there is a decision that's got to be made. And so, really, to clean the board, Sarkis ordered Artis, the Arab, to withdraw from Jerusalem. Artis obeyed. Now, I kind of figure he obeyed because Rome, the great republic of the West, was embracing nation after nation. So he had to hire, biggest army that was known on earth at that time. So Aristobulus fell upon his rear and routed the retreating army. And so we find then, because of this, that then Pompey enters into that Palestine. It's now 63 BC, and it is time for us to take a break. Let's see. Okay, we'll take a break. Let me count now. It won't be fine because I put that extra page in there while we were gone.
Oh, did you? I was following along with you.
Yeah, okay. Well, I went ahead and put it in my notes so that that would be in the notes when you get them. Whole thing. Okay, we're talking about Pompey now that he entered Palestine. That's where we left off around 63 BC. And so the news of the chaos in Palestine reached Rome, and the Roman general Pompey, who had been so successful in bringing the Roman power to the east, decided to intervene. So Pompey was one of the greatest and ablest and noblest of all the generals who ever led the armies of Rome, and his fame then filled the world. So his star, however, was shortly set by the rising of the ever victorious son of Caesar, Each brother, Hyrcanus and Aristobulus, appeared before Pompey to plead for his right to rule to the Hebrews. And so Aristobulus appeared in gorgeous, semi-barbaric splendor. Hyrcanus was more prudently attended by sober men directed by a master spirit, interpreter, the Edomite. So it was memorial occasions. You had the Jews and the Idumean and the Romans all in one place. So that was pretty good, I would assume. So Pompey delayed his decision, though. The legitimacy of the policy plainly pointed against Aristobulus. His brother's right of birth was unquestionable. The recognizing the strengths of case against him, that is, Aristobulus, became impatient from waiting on Pompey's decision. So he fled to Jerusalem and opened up open war against Hyrcanus and that of Pompey. Desperation, not hope, prompted him. I guess he was assuming that what was going to happen was that Pompey was going to rule in Hyrcanus's uh, uh, favor. So he became, as we said, out of desperation. So the Jews vindicated their right to the crown of valor, and so the Romans, there's a success. The city fell, and with it fell forever all that was worthy of the name of national independence. Make it kind of shortly is to just simply point out that in reference to Pompey, what happened with the Romans was that they would allow the Jewish people to eventually to rule within themselves as long as they didn't cause any uprising against that of the Romans. And but that changed it with Nero. He started persecuting them also. So Pompey enters the temple. The Jews were filled with unspeakable horror. Pompey was astonished when within he found no statue, no idol, no visible object of worship of any sort. So disappointed and wholly puzzled him, he retired from the Holy of Holies. So Pompey's profanity that he used, that is the words that he used, in entering within the veil of the temple, called forth the Jewish highest indignation. So his conduct in every other aspect commanded their grateful admiration. He disdained to lay unholy hands on holy money and left things as he found it. He gave directions that the action necessary to purify the temple from that of can't say the word, contamination of his presence being in there, that they should duly be formed. He appointed Hyrcanus to be high priest, but deprived him of the title king. And so he prescribed as an annual tribute and demolished the fortifications of Jerusalem. And we would find that in the other strong places also, it just wasn't in Jerusalem. That's the way he did things. He stripped Judea of all the territories acquired by conquest of the Maccabees, left to the high priest nothing save the narrow limits of the old kingdom of Judah. We see that because when we'll see that when we open up the New Testament, that all that area is run by different people. And as long as they can run those areas, countries or states, however we want to call them, they would be over them as long as they didn't do anything contrary to what Rome wanted them to do. That's the reason, again, the Jews were kept by these people who were over those places. The strong places of the Romans is that as long as the Jewish people did not uprise, cause problems, then everything was just fine. If they did, if they were not able to control that, then he'd get somebody else to be the over that strong place. So he stripped Judah of all its territories. So Samaria in the center of Galilee on the north and the Transjordic territories, east, Edom and Philistia on the south, and all these were mouthed off and Hyrcanus became his high priest, ethnarch of a territory not more than 1/10 of that which his father had been king. And so it's all being divided up. So the end of this war, the end result of the Civil War was tragic because next point, except for Rome, only one man had actually gained. And so, and he was Antipater, the Idumean plotter. Pompey returned to Rome and celebrated the most wonderful triumph which even Rome had ever seen. Stop and think about it. According to what we were told about what he did, he captured 1,000 castles, 900 cities, 800 galleys, and had refounded 900 cities. And so in Rome, 362 princes marched before Pompey's jeweled car. Among them was Aristobulus, the late king of the Jews. As I said, the late king. In previous triumphs, the captive prince were led to execution. So Pompey was humane enough and strong enough to break the cruel custom of execution. Some he sent home, of those princes, and some he kept in captivity in Rome. Now, Aristobulus was too unreliable, too dangerous, and he was thus kept in captivity in Rome. They didn't want him out because, again, he had already caused a lot of problems because he did not wait, if you recall, upon Pompey's decision. So the year was 63 BC. The Roman was at the gate. The Idumean was nigh the throne. That brings us to chapter 10, unit 10, I'm sorry. Call them chapter, we didn't. We won't either. And so, and it's entitled Historical Survey of the Hebrew People from the Rise of the Idumean, Antipater, Procurator. Now that's the word, the Procurator of Judea, to the death of King Herod the Great, 65 to 4 BC. Now, again, at 4 BC, if you recall, we have the birth of Christ, right? Because of the calendar and so forth. So our lesson ended in the year 63. And so this was the year of the three great Roman captures of Judea. Captured by Pompey in 63 BC, captured by Crassus, plundered the temple, 54 BC, and captured by Julius Caesar in 47 BC. So there was three great Roman captures of Judea. And so Cicero, a Roman orator, statesman, and philosopher, was hurling thunderbolts of his eloquence against the battered Catiline, entered into a conspiracy to assassinate the consul, according to Cicero, and was then thus foiled by him. Now, Julius Caesar, at the age of 37, had just been elected Pontifex Marimus. That is simply telling us that he's the head of the Roman religion. I personally, when I was studying this, did not know that he was the head of the Roman religion. And so that might help us to understand when we're talking about Caesar worship. When we studied the book of Revelation, we talked some about that and give. Pompey was the foremost man in all the world. In 60 BC, organized with Cracus and with Julius Caesar, thereby forming the first triumvirate. He said, triumvirate. You know how I know that's right? You said because I got divided up in my notes. Hyrcanus II now, that's the older son of Alexander Janus and Queen Alexandra, was a titular high priest, ethnarch of Judea, including the districts of Galilee, Idumea, and Perea. Aristobulus II, the brother of Hyrcanus, was an honored prisoner at Rome. I don't mean to laugh, but he was supposed to wait on what Pompey was going to say. He didn't want to wait. He caused all kinds of problems. So look there at what Hyrcanus got. He became the high priest, including not just Jerusalem, but the districts of Galilee, Idumea, and Perea. And where was Aristobulus? He was honored prisoner in Rome. Palestine was really through, though not officially, a Roman province. Okay, at this time we're talking about that they were not. So the great triumph of Pompey on his return to Rome had drawn attention of the people and the politicians to Palestine in a way wholly new. So the king, quote, king of Jerusalem, Aristobulus II, and his son Antigonus were the most gazed at of all the 362 princes who preceded the conqueror's car. Now, the Maccabees had ever been famed for their beauty of face and dignity of bearing. In Aristobulus, the Romans saw a man who, to the outward eye, was every was every in was every in I guess I got that wrong. I was every in a king. Wrong there. I hate it when I find a mistake. Every in a king. Every in a king. So the crowd whispered these strange tales concerning the Jewish people. And, thousands of Jews had been taken captive, and many others had been sold. Many who were liberated had been forced to settle in Rome. And so thus there came to be a Jewish colony in the imperial city of Rome, which grew to be of vast size. And again, is remarkable because we find when the Apostle Paul goes to Rome, he's treated like a royal, uh, like he's not royalty, but he had the freedom to go about what he wanted to do, to have visitors and things like that, not go everywhere he wanted, but he had some freedoms that were there. And not only that, but he was a Roman citizen, Paul was. So Aristobulus the second had two sons, Alexandra, or Alexander, and Antigonus. Now, Antigonus was captured and carried to Rome along with his father, Aristobulus II. He had married a daughter of Hyrcanus II. In short, he married his first cousin. Now, again, remember about the Pharisees and the Sadducees mixture also in there. Because Hyrcanus was a Pharisee. I mean, he took the Pharisee side. I'm sorry, the Sadducee side. And well, the children would have too, but Aristobulus uh, family was more Pharisaic. So, thus, one himself, this Alexander, could claim to represent both branches of the royal house because of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So, in this character, he commanded the popular sympathy of the Jews and soon found himself as the head of a very large force. In other words, he represented both branches. In other words, there was more of a solving some of the problems, and we find, like in our study of the books of New Testament, that the Pharisees and Sadducees got along a little bit better. It would seem, because when Paul was doing the things that he was doing and teaching the gospel to the Jewish people, and Pharisaic people and Sadduceic people are obeying the gospel, then they kind of joined forces against Paul. He became the head of a very large force. He displayed traditional Maccabean courage and energy for a time. He made successful headway against the Romans and their Judean allies. With the aid of the Romans, Hyrcanus was able to meet this challenge to his authority. So Alexander was forced to surrender, but his wife was spared. So in 57 BC, Aristobulus II and his son Antigonus escaped from Rome. So Aristobulus II renewed his contest with his brother Hyrcanus II. Now, the Roman general Gardinius interfered and deposed Hyrcanus II. So then in 54 BC, Crassus plundered the temple. Then in 47 BC, we find that war broke out between Caesars. Hyrcanus II and his Edomite advice, I think that's the advisor, took the side of their patriot, Pompey. So Aristobulus took the side of Julius Caesar. Now we know when we read Shakespeare how this happened. He thought, Aristobulus did, he thought that by his courts he might recover the throne. And his career ended, however, about this time by his being poisoned. And we don't know how he was poisoned, but it usually comes from somebody in the family. Alexander, the son of Aristobulus II, was beheaded about this time by the Romans. So thus Hyrcanus II, the tool of the Edomite Antipater, and his nephew Antigonus, the second son of Aristobulus II, were the only Maccabees left. Only Maccabees left. And so the case now was, when we think about it, was the Hyrcanus versus his nephew Antigonus. Antigonus took the side of Caesar against Pompey. And so in doing so, we would find that he called himself Mattathias, thus appealing to the heroic memory of the name. Now, the Hasmonean line, it began with Mattathias and ended with a Methodist. Antigonus hailed the victory of Caesar over Pompey at Pharsalia as the prelude to his own victory over Francis II and the Edomite Antipater. So he confidently reckoned that Caesar would reverse the policy of Pompey, but the Idumean Antipater forestalled him. Hastening to the victory, Antipater rendered him efficient services in the Egyptian campaign and completely won his confidence. So no matter which side was uppermost at Rome, the Edomite knew how to win. So at this point, Antipater passed out of sight. He too was poisoned. He made room for a greater, Herod, his own son. So again, we see some kind of those things that goes on among those who, when they want power. Now, this Herod is something we'll talk more about. We need to consider the circumstances that led to Herod's becoming king of Judea. Crassus came from Rome and oppressed Judea. And Antipater appointed Malichus to exact taxes from the Jews. And Malichus, provoked Crassus' anger for his failing to perform. Crassus would have killed Malichus had not Hyrcanus II, by the means of Antipater, sent him 100 talents of his own. So Malichus then laid snare and later poisoned Antipater, thinking that Antipater's death would be the preservation of Hyrcanus the first governor. So Crassus of Rome sent Herod word that he should avenge his father's death, and he commanded his army at Tyre to exist. So here Herod arranged to quietly steal Malichus away and march him. And so some characteristics of the Herod. He was a magnificent in presence. He possessed great strength and culture. He was a master of all the martial and many exercises. He was a versatile genius. He was possessed of an energy that knew no fatigue. He was a man who would have made his mark in any condition of life. He was a great administrator as a lad at the governor of Galilee. After his death, after Antipater's death, he and his brother Pharisal, between whom devoted attachment existed, he were often reduced to extremity, but as often his resourcefulness and diplomacy triumphed. So Herod's first danger, though, was really civil war that was between Brutus and Crassus. On the one side, you had Mark Antony. On the other side, you had Octavius Caesar on the other. So civil war now has broken out. Civil war arose at the assassination of that of Julius Caesar. Herod was compromised by being on the losing side. So, following the course of his father, Antipater, Herod hastened to Anthony, won his confidence, established a long-lasting friendship with him, and he returned to Palestine with the imperator of the world's masters upon his enterprise. So Antigonus, the son of Aristobulus II, in the meantime, had called in an army of Parthians to his aid. Now, remember, the Parthians is in Acts chapter 2, verses 8 through 11 there. It's being there day of Pentecost. Now, this host overran and devastated Palestine. So Herod's elder brother, Pharisee, was captured and inspired, died by his own hand. Victorious Antigonus mutilated his uncle, Hyrcanus, so as to render him unfit for the priesthood and sent him back a prisoner with the Parthians to Babylon. So here is Herod. Now Herod escapes, carries with him his family of Alexander. And Alexander was the brother Antigonus and the son of Aristobulus, whom reference has already been made. Now, Alexander's children were a son, Aristobulus, and a daughter, Mary Amni. Mary Amni was judged to be the most beautiful woman of her age. So she had already won and ever retained the love of Herod. So Herod made his way to Rome, and in the character of a protector of the young Aristobulus, claimed from his patron Anthony the support of the Roman arms. Now, Anthony was willing to give to his friend Herod what he was not willing to give an unknown stripling. And so Herod entered into Rome as an avowed advocate of another and left it in the character of the king of the Jews. Now, Antigonus, in the meantime, was in possession of patriots, and not patriot missiles, but a war followed like that of a wild beast for fury. And so Herod created forces by the fame and of his genius and the fertility of his promise. So in the midst of this war, though, he found time to wed Mary Amni. Now, if anything could reconcile the people to his kingship, it would be that the beauteous Maccabean would be thus the queen. So only after several desperate campaigns was the way declared to the capital. So at length, Jerusalem was invested by a combined horror of a siege. After 6 months, Jerusalem fell. The Romans avenged their coups and losses by pillage and massacre, and that threatened to leave Herod neither capital nor subjects. Last, though, Herod's indignant remonstrances stopped the slaughter. And so, as we've already pointed out in reference to the characters of Herod was ruthless. So what he did is that he put to death Antigonus, the son of Aristobulus. He was as ruthless as the Romans. And so he swept from his path who opposed him. He put all the Sanhedrin, save 3, to death. Now, the Sanhedrin was composed of the Sadducees. And we'll find in the opening of the New Testament that they still will be in charge of the Sanhedrin. Antigonus had surrendered. Antigonus requested to be put to death by Anthony, and so he very adroitly turned to the extent of his service to Caesar's enemy and the pirates into an argument for Caesar's friendship for the future. And Caesar received him with great distinction, permitted him to return to Palestine with unimpaired position and enlarged territory. So thus, the Herodian sunrod prosperously through every cloud. Herod lived and reigned without challenge for 28 years, 31 to 3 BC. Okay, now as we look at 3 BC, you remember what takes place is that this is when prophecies had prophesied, or basically they had said the Messiah had been born, and so find that the king of the Jews, as so to speak, that he therefore he put out the thing to have all children under age of 2 killed. His government was vigorous, if severe. He fostered learning. He was an architectural genius, and he had ambitions to build another Solomon. Here another Solomon. That is, he built a magnificent temple. He then built a palace for himself. He surpassed Solomon in both. Herod's palace was for the hospitality to others, the entertainment of strangers of distinction visiting the city. The heathen strain would cut through. He introduced names and symbols and all offending that of the Jews. So Herod became a very jealous and suspicious man. He loved his wife passionately. He gave orders that he die, she was to die also. So Mary Amne's love did not survive when she learned of her husband's cruelties toward her and her family. She held a contempt for Salome, her sister-in-law, and Herod's sister, and Salome dwelt on the note that no one loved Herod as she did. So, maddened by frenzied anger and suspicion, Herod caused his wife to be tried and condemned. He didn't know after he died to have somebody to kill her. He had this done. So Herod was approaching death, and Alexandra, the mother of Mary Amne, began plotting for Mary Amne's son to ascend to the throne. So Herod caused Alexandra and everyone under suspicion to be put to death. So later, the sons of Mary Amne were subject to a mock trial and were condemned and put to death by strangling. Again, I'd stop and think about that in reference to Herod, an Idumean, and they're not Roman territory as it would seem. The Romans were in charge of them, and what we find though is that they didn't use the cross; they strangled. As after the death of the mother, Herod's remorse was as violent, and his crime, and his crime was execrable. Right way to say that word, execrable. Execrable. A third son now plotted for the throne and was wearied that his father, in a rutted mass, continued to live. So Herod's suffering, he devised a scheme to compel a national mourning by the slaughter of all the chief men of the nation at the very moment of his death. So amid these circumstances, the star in the east appeared. Okay? No wonder then the slaughter of the innocent children of Jerusalem should escape the notice of Josephus. What was a dozen pleasant peasant babies when the highest heads in the kingdom was fallen and had been set for slaughter? Josephus he didn't write anything about the babies. He wrote about this. So that's the end of our Unit 10. Like I said, I found a list of the high priest of Israel, and I want to deal with those before we go into the cultural, political, etc. So below is a list, partially traditional, of the high priest of ancient Israel up to the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 A.D. And so, because of a lack of historical data, this list is incomplete. There may be some gaps. Okay, the line of the high priest of Israel, the office. Down there. So the office, line of the high priest of Israel, the office did not always pass directly from the father to the son in the line. So the high priest, like all Jewish priests, belonged to the Aaronic line. And so the Bible mentions the majority of the high priests before the captivity, but does not give a complete list of office holders. So this will be based on the various historical sources in several periods of Gentile rule. The high priests were appointed and removed by kings. And so still most high priests came from the Aaronic line. And one exception is Menelas, who may not have been from the tribe of Levi at all, but from the tribe of Benjamin. And so Aaron, from that of the Exodus to the Babylonian exile, the priests, and we know most of these because we studied the Old Testament, Aaron during the Exodus from Egypt, and Eleazar, the son of Aaron, then Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, then Abisha, son of Phinehas. According to the Samaritans, Shisha is inserted, said to be the son of of Elisha, and the father of Bukai. Now, Bukai is the son of Elisha and sister of Ezra. And you have Usai, the son of Bukai. Then you have Eli, the descendant of Ithmar, the son of Aaron. Then you have Hittub, son of Phinehas and grandson of Eli. Then you have Ahijah, the son of Hittub. And then all of a sudden we have Ahimelech, son of Hittub, high priest during the reign of King Saul, killed at Nob by Doeg, part of the curse on the house of Eli, that none of Eli's male descendants would live to old age, was fulfilled with the death of Ahimelech. So then you have Abiathar, son of Ahimelech, high priest, during the reign of King David and the early years of Solomon, disposed, 1 Kings 2:2-4. Then you have the fifth generation descendant of Eli, disposed from office of the high priest, which went to the house of Zadok after the Holy Spirit deserted Abiathar, and without which the Urim and the Thummim could not be consulted, according to the Jewish Encyclopedia. Now, the other part of the curse of the house of Eli, that priesthood would pass out of his descendants, was fulfilled with when Abiathar was disposed from the office of high priest. Then we had Zadok. He's listed in 1 Chronicles 6:6-8, son of Hittub, son of Amariah, and son of Merathah, son of Zerah, son Zerahiah, son of Uzziah. And again, that's given in 1 Chronicles 6:8, of the line of Eleazar, a high priest during the reign of King Solomon and the construction of the first temple. Now then you have Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, high priest during the reign of Solomon. Then Azariah, son of Ahimaaz, during the Solomon's reign of 1 Kings chapter 4. And then Joash, the son of Azariah. Jehoiarib, son of Joash. Given Jehoshaphat, son of Jehoram. Then Jehoiada, son of Jehoshaphat. And you find him in 1 Kings 11:4. Then you have Pedaiah, the son of Jehoiada. Then Zedekiah, the son of Pedaiah. And then you have Azariah the second, the son of Zedekiah, 2 Chronicles 26:17, seemingly conflated with that Azariah the first in 1 Chronicles 6:6-8. Jotham, son of Azariah. You have Urijah, son of Jotham, 2 Kings 16 and Isaiah 8:2. And Azariah the third, the son of Johanan, the son of Azariah the second. He's found in the Chronicles, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Then Hoshai, son of Azariah. Now, when we get there, the priesthood may have failed during the 50 years apostasy of Manasseh. And so Shallum, the son of Zadok, probably grandson of Hittub, son of Amariah, son of Azariah the third, according to the 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Then you have Hilkiah, son of Shallum, according to 2 Kings. Azariah the fourth, the son of Hilkiah, 1 Chronicles 6, and Zerah, son of Azariah the fourth, 2 Kings in verse 25, verse 18. So now some name Jehozadak, son of Zerah, as a high priest prior to being sent to captivity in Babylonian, which, however, is a misreading of biblical references to Joshua, son of Jehozadak, the high priest. Rashai, that is Rabbi Shlomo Yitzhaki, I don't know how you say his name. That's Hebrew. That's Jewish. Wrote that Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest, does not mean that Jehozadak ever served in the high priesthood, for he was exiled to Babylon in the days of Jeconiah, as it is written. Jehozadak went when exiled, but Joshua, his son, was the high priest when they ascended from Babylon during the second time of the second temple. Now, why was Azariah, the son of Zeriah, the scholar, not the high priest, but instead his nephew Joshua, the son Jehozadak. So this is the reason because Joshua ascended Zerubbabel many days and years before Ezra ascended, according to what he writes. And so a genealogy from Aaron through Eleazar to Jehozadak can be found in First Chronicles chapter 6. And as in several biblical genealogies, some names may be omitted, therefore it is uncertain whether high priests mentioned elsewhere, such as Jehoiada and Horeb, are simply omitted or did not belong to the unbroken male line in the genealogy. But during the latter part of the judges, the office went to Ithamar, descendants of for a period, and first known and most notable high priest being Eli. And so Abiathar was expelled. The office returned to the line of Eleazar. It is not sure whether all those mentioned in the genealogy between Zadok and Jehozadak were high priests from Solomon's time under the captivity. Josephus named 17 priests, while Zedar Olam Zuta names 19. Now, after the Babylonian exile, because that's when we get to talking about Daniel and others in reference to that of between the Testament, Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, was after the temple was restored, was the high priest. Joachim, the son of Joshua, was a high priest. Eliashib, and I'm not going to give the dates there, the son of Jehoiakim, and Jehoiada, son of Eliashib, a son married a daughter of Sanballat the Horonite, for which he was driven out of the temple by Nehemiah, and Johanan, the son of Joiada. Then you had Jaddua, son of Johanan, during the reign of Alexander Great. Some have identified him as Simon the Just. The 5 descendants of Joshua are mentioned in Nehemiah chapter 12, beginning verse 10. The chronology given above, based on Josephus, however, is not undisputed, with some alternated placing Jaddua during the time of Darius II, and some supposing one more Johanan and one more Jaddua in the following time, the latter Jaddua being contemporary with that of Alexander the Great. Now, we have read a lot about Onassis and being the high priest, and Simon the First. Eleazar, Simon the First was the son of Onassis, and Eleazar was the son of Onassis. And then you have Manasseh, the son of Jaddua. Then Onesimus II, the son of Simon. Then you have Simon II, son of Onias. Then you have Onias III, the son of Simon. Like they just name it. But you have Jason. That's an American name there. The son of Simon. Then you have Manilos. Now, this is where some people say that it stopped. But Onias IV, the son of Onias III, fled to Egypt and built a Jewish temple at Leontopolis, and that closed in 66 AD. And then you had Clemus, 162 to 159 BC. I don't know why in the world he's way down. Closed in 66 AD. So there they are. Then we have the Sacredonium. Now, that the idea of that is it is unknown. That's the idea of that word. It's kind of, I think it's Latin, but that's what that word means. It is unknown who held the position of high priest of Jerusalem between Alcimus' death and the ascension of Jonathan. Now, Josephus, in his book, and I did not put these quotes down because I didn't take the time to do so. He's just quoting that basically of what Josephus says. Josephus in the Jewish Antiquities 2010 relates that the office was vacant for 6 years, but this is indeed highly unlikely, for it's not possible. In religious terms, the high priest was a necessary part of the rites on the Day of Atonement, a day that could not have been allowed to pass uncelebrated for so long as soon after the restoration of the temple service. So we find politically, Israel's overlords probably would not have allowed a power vacuum to last at this length of time. So in another passage by Josephus in 12:10 and section 6, And then in 1211, in section 2, Josephus suggests that Judas Maccabeus, the brother of Jonathan, held the office for 3 years, succeeding Alchemist. However, Judas actually predeceased Alchemist by 1 year, so the nature of Jonathan's accession to that of the high priesthood made it unlikely that Judas held that office during the interim sacerdotalium. And so the Jewish Encyclopedia points out to us that, it points out that they try to harmonize the contradictions found in Josephus by supposing that Judas held the office immediately after the consecration of the temple, 165, 162, that is before the election of alchemists. And so it has been argued that the founder of the Quran community, the teacher of righteousness, Melchizedek, was a high priest, but not necessarily the sole occupant during the inner sacrament, and was driven off by Jonathan. So this view is based on sources from the Koran, Koran, or Quran, yeah. That, not Quran, Koran, Qumran, I can't, that portrayed the teacher as a figure of authority, usually associated with the high priest, however, without clarity, spelling out names of events. So that brings us down, especially now, because we look at that, and that brings us down, as we've talked about before, the Asmodean dynasty, really helping us during that of between the Testaments. He points out that Jonathan, Alphas, 153 to 143 BC, then Simon Tassi, the brother of Jonathan, Alphas, next, then John Hyrcanus the first, the son of Simon Simeon Tassia, and then we have Aristobulus the first, the son of John Hyrcanus, and then Alexander Jannaeus, we've already looked at his other names also, son of John Hyrcanus, and then John Carrihanus the second, the son of Alexander Jannaeus, and then Aristobulus the second, son of Alexander Jarius. Genesis. I get that there. Then John Hyrcanus II was restored 63 to 40 BC, and Antigonus, son of Aristobulus II, 40 to 37 BC. Then Aristobulus III, 36 BC, last of the Hasmoneans, paternal grandson of Aristobulus II and brother of Herod's wife, Mary Antony, the second wife of that of Herod. Okay, now we have the high priest under the Herodians and the Romans. Okay, Ananelus, and then you have Aristobulus III, 36 BC. Like I said, the last, and he was the last of the Hasmoneans. Patriarch, grandson of Aristobulus II, and brother, so forth. We already pointed that out. I got that down there twice. What we're going to have to do, I'm going to leave it that way. But I don't know if I got it down there twice or not. Just copied that thing, and it just, that's what it gave me. So, excuse me. Sinus drains. That's down there twice, so I have to look because he's still Herodians and Romans. Yeah, well, I think what that is you recall there at the very end there of Aristobulus and so forth, what was going on with Herod. That might be the reason. So you have that of Joshua being Fabus. He became 30 to 23 BC. And Simon ben Abathus, his daughter, Mary Antony, third wife of Herod, married Herod the Great, the parents of Herod II, was the first husband of Herodias. And then you have there, let's see, you see there Matthias ben Theophilus. Okay, now watch this. Joazar ben Boethius, 4 BC, a Sadducee. Eleazar ben Thosis, 4 to 3 BC, a Sadducee. And then you have a list of the 4 priests of a list of high priests of Israel there. You have Joshua ben C, 3 BC, question mark. Josar ben Bothus, up to 6 AD, he's a Pharisee. Annas ben Seth, 6 to 15 AD. All these are AD dates. I didn't put AD in there after I put AD one time. Then Annas ben Seth, 6 to 15. Ishmael ben Fabus, 15 to 16. Eleazar ben Annas, 16 to 17. Simon ben Kamitha, 17 to 18. Joseph. You have, let me go back just a few minutes. All right. Separated. Then you have Jophus, Caiaphas, 18 to 36, the son-in-law of the high priest Annas, and so forth. They're mentioned in the Bible. And so then you have Jonathan ben Annas, 36 to 37. Theophilus ben Annas, 37 to 41. Simon Cantatherius ben Botus, a Sadducee, 41 to 43. Matthias ben Annas, 43. Then another Elionus ben Sidon, Cantatherius, the 43, 47. He was 44. He was a Sadducee. Then Jonathan ben Annas was restored. Josephus ben Commodus, 44 to 46. Annas ben Nebulus, 46 to 52. Jonathan, 52 to 56. Ishmael ben Fabus, 56 to 62. That's right after, that's why Paul was in the Roman prison there. Joseph Cabbi ben Simon, 62 to 63. He's getting out of prison. Epistles are written. Annas ben Annas, 63. Joshua ben Damius, 63. Joshua ben Galamiah, 63, 64. Now, his wife, Martha, belonged to the family of Botus, that is a Sadducee. And then you had Mattathias ben Theophilus, 65 to 66 BC. Now, during the first Jewish-Roman war, we had Phanius ben Samuel, okay, 67 to 70. And I put the references down there, but they're not marked. They should be marked in there. I'm not really sure. And then you had the rulers and the events of the Ptolemies and the Seleucids in Palestine. It shows the dates there, and I think we may have done that before in reference to them. I don't really get back. I think we did maybe a couple of times going over those. Also, the Ptolemaic rule continued till 30 BC. This is Egypt now. This is when Egypt became a Roman province. Okay, and here are the people that ruled. If you'll notice, the Seleucids, Antiochus, Seleucus, Antiochus, Demetrius, Alexander, Balas, Demetrius II. And you had the Seleucian rule continued to 64 BC when it was brought to an end by Pompey. Then you had the Maccabeans and the Hasmoneans, Judas Maccabeus, Jonathan high priest, Simon high priest, John Hyrcanus high priest, Aristobulus the first high priest and king. And notice that he was also known as the king. Alexander Jannaeus, high priest and king. Alexander Salome, then Hyrcanus the second high priest, and Aristobulus the second high priest and king. That was restored to them. And Antigonus, high priest and king. And then you had Herod the Gate, 37 to 4 BC, and that was the Herod of the time of Christ. Rulers in Judea from the death of Herod to the Jewish war, Archelaus, 4 BC to 6 AD. The Roman procurator, 6 to 41 AD. Herod Agrippa the first, 41 to 44 AD. Now, you can find him in Acts. That's the one that caused himself to be so great he was eaten up with worms. Then you had the Roman procurators, 44 to 66. Remember now, you got the Caesars as kings during those times. Important events: the temple was polluted by Antiochus Epiphanes, 168 BC, and the Maccabean revolt, 167 BC. Rededication of the temple, 165 BC. Jonathan appointed high priest, 152 BC. Independence created, 142 BC. Simon appointed a hereditary high priest and ethnarch. That's very important there. Then the ascension of John Hyrcanus the first and the emergence of the Pharisees and Sadducees, 134 to 104. The independence is lost. Pompey captures Jerusalem, 63 BC. The ascension of that of Herod, 37 BC. The death of Herod, 4 AD. The Jewish war, 66 to 70 AD. Jerusalem is destroyed by Titus. Any question? that was a lot in reference to looking at that. Now, what we're going to do next is basically, you'll see there in the notes. I got to find it. Okay, there it is. I must have closed it. But I'm going to give you an overview of that of the book that we're going to use. It's the culture. It's called The Culture and Literary Background Between the Testaments by D.S. Russell. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, you won't see that culture and literary background, but that's what it's all about, cultural and literary background. And I figured, like I said, I couldn't get the copy of Pfeiffer's book, so I figured we'd get this one. So basically what we're going to do in this, we're going to look at the cultural and the literary background. And we're going to talk about Judaism versus Hellenism. You recall in Acts chapter 6, Judaism is what we would simply say a Judea. Okay, let's just say it's Judea. And then Hellenism is the dispersion. Everybody's been dispersed. And in that, there's the rise and the spread of Hellenism. That is the culture part of that. And it gives us an insight. When we get down to it, it gives us an insight because dispersion is what helped cause the gospel to go throughout the world. We're going to show talk about the rise and spread of Hellenism, discuss the Greeks and the Romans, also the Septuagint, and not only just the Septuagint, but Hellenistic literature, Greek culture in Palestine, religious influence of Hellenism, the reaction against Hellenism, the Hellenizing party in Jerusalem, the vengeance of Antiochus, Maccabeans and the Maccabean revolt, Hasmonean house, and Herod and the Romans. And the people, when we're going to look at the book. I'm going to try. We talk about the Torah, Torah, and about 3 or 4 different words there. I'm going to try to go back in the notes and put what they are. Torah is, and I'm going to say this, and I think I'm right, it's the first 5 books of the Old Testament. And so we're going to talk about from the temple to the Torah. The rallying point of the revolt, the Holy Covenant, the Torah and the sects being the Pharisees. We'll talk more about them as a group. Sadducees and the Essenes and the Zealots and the coveters of Curate. Now, I have already, I think I have already given all the passages of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. There are no passages on the Essenes. There are some Zealots in the New Testament. I think I just gave the number. I don't know if I gave the passage, but I'll go back and look. Then we're going to talk about the sacred writings, the Holy Scriptures, the Hebrew canon, and then the Scriptures in the dispersion. Okay, because they're Jewish people and they're dispersed and they're taking on the Greek culture. We're going to talk about that. The oral tradition is origin and development, its form and content. And then we're going to look at, as we call them, the outside books. He calls them the outside books, the non-canonical literature. There are books that that people thought should be in the canon, they were not. And then milieu of the apocalyptic literature. And then the apocryphal literature, which we've already looked at those, but we're going to look at them a little bit more. The other apocryphal books are the pseudographic books. When I was doing some some research within that book, I'd come across books, and I just automatically would go over there to the King James with the apocrypha. But those books weren't in there, so they were the pseudo epigraphical. And so he talks about them, but I'm going to list them right before that part. I'm going to list them. We're going to talk about their identity and also in the Koran community. Then we'll talk about the apocryphal books in Christianity, in the New Testament, in the history of the church. Now, in the history of the church, we're not talking about, we'll talk about some about the New Testament church. We'll watch what he has to say, the author has to say. Then the latter part that we'll deal with is the apocalyptics, the message and the method of the apocalyptic tradition, the hidden secret, the language of symbolism, the Ezra legend, the apocalyptic prophecy, the unity of history, the last things, the form of inspiration, pseudo-dominity, a literacy device, extension of personality, the significance of the name. And then we'll talk about the Messiah and the Son of Man, the Old Testament background, the traditional national Messiah, the Levitic Messiah, the Davidic Messiah, the Messiah of the Dead Sea Scrolls, Jesus and the Messiah, transcendent Messiah and the Son of God, the apocalyptic Son of Man, the Oriental background, Son of Man as Messiah, suffering and death, Jesus and the Son of Man, the resurrection and life beyond. The resurrection is origin and development. We're going to talk about that, about how the Pharisees and Sadducees fell, even though we'll talk about it when we talk about them. But the Old Testament preparation, historical origin, and subsequent developments, the resurrection and the Messianic kingdom. Again, we'll watch what he says. The nature of survival, Sheol, the abode of the souls, moral distinction and shed, moral change in the life beyond, individual and the soul in the final judgment, the resurrection belief and the nature by the resurrection body, resurrection of the body and the survivor of personality, the resurrection of the body and its relationship to the environment, the relation of the spiritual body to the physical body. One of those we may not cover. There's other things more important, it seems to me, because he's just going to give us his opinion on those things, and he can glance over them if we run out of time with the other things. But I don't foresee that we'll be using those or going through those. Okay. So anything when you look, Jim, on the outline, like I said, I have in this part on down, if I'm not mistaken, I have given all of the inserts from the Maccabees. Now, I think in the other part, I put the Maccabee quotations right after the passage was given. This time, what I did, I went on down to the bottom of the paragraph, and I put them in, and I put those things in there. As a matter of fact, in some of those, for instance, in one of it's First Maccabees chapter 1 verses 11 through 15. I think on that one he had verses 11 through 14, and I added 15 because in my Maccabean copy, it had that was the end of the paragraph, so that's what I did. And then also there's another thing that comes up in this book. We'll talk about some of those, like the Wisdom of Solomon and so forth. I put those in there too. But I didn't highlight those. I probably need to go back and highlight them. I'm trying to figure out that other thing, and I have it. I copied the other one. He talks about different people, but has this one piece of paper that he was historical type paper, and Albert, was it Albert something or other, and it's in there. And when I get down through there, and if you want that, you remind me, and I will send that to you. It's a
Okay.
It's some kind of like a survey, not a survey, but how they looked upon did some work on some times back then, and so he does a good job on that, and it seems, and so it may be helpful. So I'll give you a copy if you remind me when we get down there. But in this latter part where he quotes them, and it is old paper, very old paper. Okay. Anything else?
Good to go. Thank you, Bobby.
Yeah. Good night.
You too, Bobby. Thanks.